Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John V. has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello everyone, welcome to a brief introduction on a two-part video I have done actually on inequality and exploitation throughout history, from Plato to Luther and from Thomas Müntzer to the present, down to our time, to our neoliberal era. Uh, Exploitation, inequality and exploitation are really an integral part of human civilization of the last 5,000 years. We see with the rise of civilization and a class structure and the formation of the state and the elites, the hierarchical structure, social structure in a society. So the egalitarianism, let's call it natural egalitarianism of human beings who were food gatherers and hunters before civilization begins to give way with the rise of civilization, which also brings with it private property. So there's enormous literature on this issue, not just now, but historically, there have been some very fine studies that have been done on the issue of inequality and exploitation. One of the reasons that I decided to do this two-part study on inequality and exploitation is because of the contradiction that we are faced in society, with society moving toward high technology and biotech and artificial intelligence, and yet there is more inequality and more exploitation, including in the advanced capitalist countries, which is interesting in itself, by the way. This is not just a phenomenon of the global south, where, for example, let's say in Africa, um, whether it's in the Congo, in sub-Saharan Africa, or in the Ivory Coast, but rather throughout the world, including the advanced capitalist countries. So it seems, although there is progress at the technological and scientific levels, clearly, there is regression. We're going backwards when it comes to the issue of securing greater social justice, greater equality, and less exploitation. Clearly, there is no form of exploitation worse than slavery. And slavery existed in the ancient times. Slaves were usually invariably um, prisoners of war, people that they caught and reduced them to slavery, sold them to slavery. There were slave marts in a number of Mediterranean countries throughout the ancient times. And of course, the slaves were considered the lowest in the social ladder, in the hierarchy, in the social hierarchy. So clearly, when we look at inequality, that is that the slaves are at the lowest level, and at the highest was the nobility, the aristocracy, a Greek word. By the way, the aristocracy means rule of the best. Um, So the aristocracy, which invariably was linked to land, they owned land. This is long before the Industrial Revolution, centuries before the Industrial Revolution. So the means of wealth were rooted in land. There was also shipping and there were merchants, but the landowning class was, whether in Greece or in Rome, or in Egypt, by the way, they were the at the highest level in the social ladder. Inequality clearly is, and exploitation is class based. The lower you go down the social ladder, the greater the exploitation, the greater the inequality. That is not surprising. What is surprising is that brilliant minds like Plato and Aristotle accepted it as a given, a natural phenomenon, although they knew it was man made. It was part of the social contract, which the social contract human beings make, namely the elites, so they can perpetuate their privileged role in society, you see. So the when you read Plato's Republic, it's in there. You see it very clearly. Um, you see it in Aristotle's Ethics. They knew, Aristotle especially, but Plato as well. Plato, by the way, was an aristocrat. Um, they knew that this was man-made. They knew very well that this was man-made. That the social structure, the social hierarchy, was symptomatic of a social contract. And for example, metics, which in Athens, a metic was a foreigner. In other words, someone who was not an Athenian citizen. That person was at a lower social status, not as low as a slave, but lower. Was also the issue of gender inequality and exploitation, by the way, and that too comes with the role of the state, private property, and the military. Um, so the fact is that women had a lower status, and this is worldwide, by the way, whether it was in the Indian subcontinent or in the Mediterranean civilizations. It's the same thing during the Middle Ages. Um, no different during the Middle Ages. Now, the interesting thing here is that the higher up you go with regard to gender inequality, the greater rights and privileges the women had. I should say privileges women had. If let's say the difference between a serf, a woman who was a serf, semi-slave, in other words, in the fields, versus a the wife or the daughter of an aristocrat, a large landowning aristocrat. A huge difference there. Although the male was dominant. The other element here that I discuss in the full videos, which I invite you to watch, is of course religion. Religion played a role in exploitation and inequality. True, religion regulated gender relations, in regulated relations between human beings. It provided a moral foundation for society so that we would not have any sort of chaos, human beings in the state of nature slaughtering each other, and giving in to passion, um, but rather observing certain ethical precepts. However, the problem is that religion limited um, equality to the spiritual realm, not to the material realm. And we see this throughout in all monotheistic religions, by the way. Monotheistic in the Abrahamic religions, in other words, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in all three. So while they accept spiritual equality, they do not accept socioeconomic equality. So social justice is limited to the spiritual realm, and it doesn't go beyond that. Um, there were attempts during the Reformation by one of Luther's disciples, his name is Thomas Munzer, to have society extend, to have the spiritual realm extend to the social, economic, and political rights, um, and to have egalitarianism on earth, not just in the next life, not just at the spiritual realm. And there was a revolution, by the way, the German Peasants' War. It's called in history, in European history. That was thoroughly suppressed, and that was the end of that. And Thomas Mutzer was executed because he led this revolution. Now, as we go forward in history, by the time of the French Revolution, women and the working class do become involved in demanding social justice, the end of exploitation, and equal rights. And we do get in the 18th century, finally, philosophers, thinkers of the 18th century, philosophes, as the French call them, critical thinkers who argue that human beings are created equal, just as the US Constitution points out, for example. Of course, that's in theory. In practice, there was no such thing. There wasn't then, there isn't now, by the way. And we see inequality actually rising with the Industrial Revolution because of the power that capitalists enjoyed in influencing public policy. And that's the key. I invite you to take a look at the video on inequality and exploitation, and to write comments, and to please subscribe to this channel, which is an educational channel. My very good friend Asad Alim manages this channel. I thank you for listening.